think it was a witch's curse. I think it was my own...
Witch's curse.
No, I think it was my own doing.
Oh. Weather, pretty cold today.
Yeah.
You know why?
Witch's curse?
Witch's curse.
True. They were like, you can't have 20-degree weather anymore. Curse.
Everything that's wrong in your life.
Witch's curse. Yeah, or the devil.
Well, yeah. They go together.
Yeah, they do.
You're so cursed, they call you Kirsty Alley. Kirsten Dunst?
Oh, yeah. That goes with last episode.
You're so cursed and give wooden performances that they call you Kirsten Stewart. Is her name Kirsten or Kristen?
It's Kristen.
Is it? Oh, okay, I don't actually know.
And Kristen Dunst.
No, it's Kirsten Dunst.
Is it Kirsten?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
That one I'm sure of.
Okay.
I don't know about Stewart, though. Should we just start the podcast? We don't have anything funny at the beginning
Not
of this
really.
time.
I don't feel very funny right now.
This is a serious podcast today.
So serious like a witch's curse.
Oh, that is very serious. Well, welcome everyone to a very special Spooktober episode.
Ooh.
There it is. Of I Love This, You Should Too. I am your host who loves to live deliciously, Indy Randhawa. And with me is my lovely co-host who loves the taste of butter, Samantha Randhawa.
Yeah, I thought that was funny that there was like, would you like to taste butter? As like a temptation.
I have a little insight, because you know how I know a bunch of useless stuff?
Yeah.
In the 17th century, tasting butter was a sin.
Oh.
Yeah, that was outlawed by the church.
But that's like something that's naturally made from processing milk.
Are you going to say like, hey, the church was being illogical?
Yeah, okay.
And also in England, it was a sin for poor people, but not a sin for rich people. Almost like the church is...
dumb?
Yeah. I was going to say just an establishment to make sure that the...
rich stay rich and the poor stay poor?
And the patriarch and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, all that.
Well, this is actually probably kind of a good intro.
Probably.
Because we are going to be talking about the film The Witch from 2015, a New England Folktale.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my pick, something that I really liked, and I brought it to Samantha, who has never seen it before, because that's what we do on this podcast. Yeah. And we're going to get into it. We are not just going to tell you what happened in the movie. You should watch the movie.
Yeah.
But we are going to get into, I think we analyze things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is an analysis podcast. It's not just a review podcast.
But we expect you to do your homework first.
Yeah. And I think what we were talking about at the beginning probably gives you a good sense of how a lot of, at least my analysis, is going to go. Because I tend to have kind of a feminist reading on a lot of things, especially something like this, which seems like it's very much at the forefront.
Yeah.
And I'm not the most pro-Puritan church person either.
Yeah. I feel like we're going to have a lot of things that we agree on this episode.
There are so many places where we could start this discussion, but I think what we have to do first is...
The classic.
The classic. I had seen this movie once in theaters, really liked it. I talked about it on the last episode, but the people at the theater warned me that this is a terrible movie and everyone hates it. I thought it was very good. I watched it once again, maybe last year, maybe 2 years ago, for the Thing of the Week that we did on this podcast. And I thought, oh, it was very good. Then we watched it again last week. And you know what? It gets better for me with every subsequent watch. I think it peaked at the last watch. I loved it. So my answer is yes, I still love this. But it is a new movie to you, Samantha. So I love this movie. Did you? Oh, I know where it's going already.
I liked it.
There it is.
It wasn't like my absolute favorite movie ever. I didn't love it.
Well, I imagined it wouldn't be your favorite ever, but it's not even at that 8 out of 10 for you?
I think it was like a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
I'm sorry.
Ooh.
I'm sorry. I feel
don't
bad.
Apologize to me.
I feel bad.
That's
it was
what
just...
this podcast is for.
Yeah.
To disagree, and then I try to convince you why actually this movie's pretty great.
Yeah, I definitely think that it had a great like story, and I think they did a really good job with like a large part of it, but I just can't upgrade to love. I'm sorry.
Do you know what is holding you back? Are there issues you have with this movie?
I don't know. Maybe we'll get into that like as we're discussing things, but like nothing comes to mind right away. It was just a little slow paced, and I get why it's slow because it is like creepy, scary, and it's like a slow, scary plot all the way through. But I just, I don't know, maybe
you need a little more action in there.
I needed just something else. And then when there was action, it was so quick that like it didn't really. I wanted the action to last a little longer, I guess.
That is one of probably the top 3 main criticisms of this movie. Always is that it's just slow. So before I was like, yeah, it's slow, but now I'm like, it's not slow. Oh. It moves. This is a short movie, and I don't know what scene I would cut out of this. I think it could have been longer.
I just feel like it just needed something more for me to like really love it. And I don't know what that thing is, but maybe I'll figure it out while we discuss.
And I think it depends a lot on what you are taking away from this movie. I'm not someone who's going to say that this is the right reading and this is the wrong reading, but I do feel like how you look at this movie makes you feel different ways about it. Because on my first watch going in completely blind, I was like, okay, spooky horror movie. Oh, it's quite slow. Yeah. And upon my most recent watch, I knew the story already, and I was kind of more going along with the character of Thomasin. Because I knew that she's the protagonist, and I was really focusing on her a lot more, which the movie invites you to do because she's the only one that she talks essentially directly to camera. A couple of times she looks right into camera. So I should have picked up on that earlier, that we should be following her journey. And when you're following the journey of this girl who is pulled out of her home not once but twice, everyone in her life turns on her in one way or another. She's blamed for everything. That movie moves quickly. There is always something in service of that story. And I think maybe I latched onto that story a lot more in subsequent viewings, and that's why it felt like it did not lag at all to me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested to hear kind of your takes on the movie, because I did really enjoy it, approaching it from someone who knows quite a bit about like the Salem witch trials and the like religious reform in Europe and what caused the Puritans to leave Europe and that kind of thing. So I'm really interested to hear your take on it.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about the witch trials a bit throughout this, because how could you not? But to set things up, I think there's one thing that I always forget about when talking about the witch trials, and maybe it's different for different people, but for someone who is not of the Christian faith, and all of the witch trial things seemed silly to me, of course. Although I think there's some people who still believe, like, yeah, they were witches.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't think that we would have to say, like, oh yeah, we don't believe that the witches in Salem were witches. No. They were just people in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were scapegoats.
They were women and possibly mentally ill people. Yeah. And people who just like didn't fit in with Puritan society, which is okay.
Or just one person didn't like. Yeah. That's all it needed to have. But I feel like we need to say that because in the last year, I'm not as up on American politics, but they don't have a House of Commons. They have a House of Representatives, I believe. Yes. But in whatever it was, demons are brought up. Like there are elected officials who talk about demons, like literal demons. Like not in spirit of like, oh, the demon of poverty. They believe that there are literal demons. So that's a thing to a large portion of the world. Yeah. People do believe in literal demons. And that brings me back to what I was talking about. There's something that I always forget about in that time, because I look on it as this is what happens with unchecked power. Yeah. This is what happens when people are just trying to persecute others. Yeah. But to a lot of people, and to many people at the time, they believed it. Yes. Yeah. They believed that there were literal demons out there that are just waiting for you to let your guard down, and then they're going to get you. Yeah, I always find this level of religiousness to be like shocking, and I think it has to do with like the world that we live in now, because there's
it doesn't permeate every facet of our lives, right? Like,
no, especially not us.
No, I feel like back then, I just can't imagine just being miserable because your God says to. Like, those are the rules.
Oh, that I can believe way more, because I'm you know how I live my life. I'm very willing to be miserable if it's in service of something that I think is for the greater good.
Right.
Like, look at how I eat and exercise. I don't enjoy any of that, but I feel like it's for some sort of greater good.
Right.
So I could definitely see that, but the idea of walking around and being like, there might be a demon in that forest, being an adult and thinking there might be a demon that could get me, that's terrifying.
It's like the original Don't Go Into the Woods.
How could you live your life? And to people now, I always want to ask, if you are someone who believes in, there's people who believe in literal heaven and hell, and they're going to go and all of that sort of stuff. And that's all well and good. Yeah. Well, usually it's all well and good. Yeah. But
I think if it's not hurting anyone else.
It always shocks me that there can be someone who's like, oh yeah, you'll go to hell for that. But then they don't know the entirety of the Bible.
Yes.
Like, if I believed that if I do something wrong according to this book, I will meet a literal devil and live in a place of literal fire, I would know every word of that book.
Oh, totally.
How do you not inform yourself?
So very well versed in all of it and be able to like back up your thinking.
But you know what? I think it's definitely going to come up, but I think we should try not to just be like, yeah, and America today.
Yeah, no.
Because there's enough people doing that.
Oh,
What we want to do is really get into this movie.
Absolutely.
So I brought that up just to put us in that position, that mindset of, yes, there is
literal demons,
actual devil that is out there that is just trying to get you.
Yeah, constantly.
And we live a life that's so far removed from that, that this movie, I think, does a better job of putting us in that place than any other movie to me. Mm-hmm. It makes me understand that religious fear like no other movie can, because I think most other movies will look at a witch trial as being just a man looking for an excuse to kill a woman.
Yeah.
Because that's usually
kind of what it was.
Yeah.
I think this movie does a really good job of that, and it does kind of bring you into the world really well and really show you what life was like for them. I feel like a lot of movies that take on like this subject matter, and maybe not like this specific subject matter, but like so the Salem witch trials or something, they gloss over a lot of like the hardships of their lives by moving to a completely different continent in a place where there was no infrastructure, and just how hard their lives were, as well as all of the like religious repression.
No European infrastructure, at least.
Yes. Yeah. I just meant they moved away from like full cities of like English style homes and everything, and glass. Thomasina talks about like glass windows and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed that they brought through those like hardships that they would have faced based on their choices.
And I think that's probably the third villain or problem of the movie is the land, right? Mm-hmm. We have the supernatural, we have this family dynamic, and then it's just the wilderness.
Yeah.
And I think there's a criticism of this movie in people saying that this is a movie that proves the witch accusers right, because in this movie there is a literal witch.
Yeah.
But I think that's far too simple. I definitely don't think Eggers believes that the Salem witch trials were just. I think what he's doing here is what we were talking about. He's putting us in the position of those people. He's saying, imagine a world where the devil coming and seducing you and your family is a legitimate threat. And because that's what the people of the time believed, and that's what's actually happening in this movie. Like, it is literal. Well, I guess we can debate that later, but of course, the witch trials, we'll both agree, at least both of us, that this was just scapegoating and a little bit of mass hysteria and groupthink and all of that. But this is able to give you the feel of what the witch trial movies that I've seen can't do, because it's putting you in the place of fear of those people, not the part that's much less fun when it's just people being terrible to other people.
Yes, yeah.
And I love that this movie kind of distills so many things down. Like, you can see this as you could see this family as a microcosm for the witch trials at all. And of course, we can talk about how the witch trials then are kind of a microcosm of what America became to be. But it's such a nice distillation because here we have the family who was too pure for the Puritans, so they're removed, just as the Puritans were too pure for England. And then they left. And then they had to go to this unknown world and face all those hardships there, and then the family is just doing that on a little micro form as well. And then we also get, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, that all the different ways women are blamed for the failings in society. I feel like the writer, Eggers as well, has done a great job of trying to include so much of that within that one family. We get to see those representations of, well, this is how it usually goes on a grand scale of like the Western world, and here it is on a tiny scale of this one little family.
Yeah, I liked the kind of simplification of it, because it is kind of a big concept to grasp when you think about like an entire town and all of that. But this was really cool to see it just happen amongst like, was it like
7 people?
7 people, yeah.
6 mostly.
6 mostly, yeah. The baby isn't early in the movie. But yeah, I liked the simplification of it for sure.
Well, let's get into it. We've actually been talking for a while already, but let's really get into it.
Let's get right into it.
And let's talk about different ways to read this movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you what you think.
Okay.
Like what is actually happening? What is being said here? Because I love how this movie plays with ambiguity and different possible readings. Like it's not...
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just agreeing with you.
It's not a movie where one person says something and the other person says something else and you have to believe what's real. It's quite explicit in a lot of ways. And often we're not wondering like, oh, what actually happened? Like, what actually happened to the baby? We see what happens to the baby. It's very explicit.
Very graphic.
And at the end, we don't really wonder, or maybe we do. I don't want to tell you how you're going to read it, but we probably won't wonder if witches are real at the end of this movie. Right. In the movie's world, we see the main character becoming a witch.
Yeah.
But still, with all of that, there's still a lot of room for debate, a lot of ambiguity, and I feel like how it presents itself, not just being unreliable narrators or something like that, it's a lot more fun. There's so many different readings, and I think we'll get into them right now, but the way it presents itself by showing you the same things, like we can both see the same things and take away the same literal story from it, but read into it very differently. Because I can see so many readings towards this, and even little things I always want to ask, like, what do you think about this? So let's start getting into that a little bit. Do you have a kind of just a overall base reading of this movie?
Yeah, I one of the things that like really stood out to me, and obviously I was watching this from Thomason's like perspective. She's a very compelling character, and she's very easy to like get behind, kind of. Like they make it really easy for you to watch it from her perspective. One of the themes that I found really interesting and like enjoyed in the movie was the idea of children getting to an age where they start to question their worlds. And that's like a big thing in like modern religion too, is that like a lot of children get to an age where they have their own thoughts and they're experiencing the world a little bit more, and then they're suddenly questioning everything that they've been told up until then. And especially in like extreme religion, you see a lot of people who are like 15, 16 to like 18 who are seeing things for themselves now and are starting to question their way of life. And so it's really interesting to see Thomason and her brother Caleb starting to like work out for themselves this world that they live in. And I really liked the way that they kind of dealt with that. And I feel like you see Caleb being interested in kind of what's under his sister's shift, because he doesn't like, he's probably never had those thoughts before, or like lived in a society where that's okay. And you get Thomasin, who is starting to kind of think for herself and realize that it's like kind of opposite to what her whole religion. You hear that prayer at the beginning of her saying like, I've sinned, I've like talk back to my parents, I've, you know, been idle, I've like said I'm doing something but I haven't, and like that kind of thing. And those are like total normal teenage girl things.
Yeah.
And you can see her kind of starting to think of like, but why is this wrong? And that's kind of an interesting thing that this movie brings up.
I never really looked at that part of it very much, but it's definitely all there. Even right at the beginning when they are excommunicated or whatever it is, they all leave and Thomasin stays there for a second, being like, so that's kind of she's not a defiant character by any means. Well, until maybe the end.
Yeah.
But how could she not be? But she stays just for a little bit more, and then her brother has to like bring her along, just showing the slightest little thing that she's a little bit away from her family.
Yeah.
And she's the first one. She's the only one who we see kind of confessing. And all of her confessions were the things you were saying, which are not bad in the grand scheme.
Like, yeah.
And then the actual sins that the rest of her family has, we can see the terrible effects they have, but there's no confession for those ones. There's no type of repentance. Oh, I guess the father does have that moment where he's talking directly to God and talking about his pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked her journey, and I guess Caleb's journey too, through kind of self-discovery of having your own thoughts on things. I found that really interesting.
So normally I have these very convoluted and complex readings on it. My big reading for this one is quite simply, if you're a woman, everyone's going to blame you for everything anyways, so you might as well have some fun.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems like what it comes down to. But it's funny that we are both kind of on the same page of a lot of this, because again, I tried to read about this movie and I really disliked everything I read, so I never went any further. But a lot of the readings were about how Thomasin was evil this entire time. And I didn't get that at all.
I don't think so.
And then people are like, oh yeah, and this bitch ruined. And it's like, I think you are the people that this movie is being made about.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
are on the wrong side of
You're
this.
You're blaming her for it.
Because that's exactly what everyone does in this movie. Everyone turns on her in a way that mirrors how society, in one way or another, is failing women in general. Like, the father looks at her as just a source of labor, and then he's going to sell her off as a servant / mother / wife, because also servant / mother / wife
is a job.
It is all of those. Those are things are all kind of together to them, right? I guess I don't want to blame him too much because he actually doesn't want to, but that is kind of his role, right?
And they have
He's
to
been put into
because
this role.
The family doesn't have what they need in order to survive, and selling off your daughter is the easiest way to get back on track with the Lord and also with money.
Yeah. And then when she confronts him about being a hypocrite, and rightfully so, because he was, he calls her a bitch and he throws her down. And I don't think we have to draw a parallel between each one of these points of like, look how it still happens. We all know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We're all on the same page, so that's still happening all the time. And then the mother has this jealousy once she feels that Thomasin is in a role where she can usurp her own power. Mm-hmm. And she says, oh, you've been a source of lust for your brother and for your father. And she has done nothing. She just looks as she looks, and she's being blamed for other people looking at her. Yeah. Which, again, we don't really need to draw a parallel between today, right? We all know that.
Oh, we all know.
Okay. I feel like there's people that don't know.
True.
So if you don't know, that happens all the time.
100%.
Women are blamed for being too attractive. Yeah. Essentially, like, how dare you look like that? It distracted me. Not, why am I distracted and ogling you?
Yeah. That goes from school dress codes all the way to you had it coming and that's why you got attacked.
Yep. I think Caleb doesn't ever turn his back on her. I think he is a good character.
Oh, yeah.
Not good character. They're all good characters. He is a good person. His character is a good person.
Yeah.
But you can see that he is kind of at the beginning of starting to see women as sexual objects, right? It is, of course, at the beginning because he's a relatively innocent young boy, but he's also being kind of groomed by his father to be the next patriarch.
Man of the house, yeah,
because
absolutely.
that's what you need to be. And then the children use her as a scapegoat, which is ironic because the actual perpetrator is a real goat. And then even the baby, you can't blame the baby for anything, but to the baby, she is just a caregiver and nothing more.
Yeah.
And that's how she is seen to a lot of the family. And you're just going to get blamed for everything anyways, so you might as well have some fun and be a witch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that reading is kind of what I took away from it upon our most recent viewing. And then on another very simple but fun and maybe more complicated when you really look at reading, it's being a Puritan sucks. Having fun with the devil seems kind of sweet in this movie.
It seems way better than being a Puritan.
If you just take away the first 15 minutes where we see a baby get all guacamole'd up and rubbed all over, then the witches don't do anything too bad. So then you're like, yeah, I'm on the witches team. Yeah. Because really the Puritans seem pretty terrible.
So one thing that I kind of took from this, and I think this is just from doing a lot of reading of people escaping cults or extreme religion, is that the instance of leaving a cult or extreme religion, and then getting sucked into another extreme religion is really, really common.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're looking for that organization. And I thought about that in the terms of she runs to a coven, which is kind of just another religion, right? And so
it's just another small cult, the one she was just
exactly. In. So I thought that was really interesting that
that's true.
That she ends up kind of going to another organized religion that is it's said to be bad, but it is basically the same thing, and I thought that was really interesting.
It seems like at points you could make an argument that this movie is saying that puritanical culture is the villain and Satanism is the hero. But I don't think that's it, because we have all the baby mashing.
Yeah, I could see that argument though, for sure.
It seems like for 75% of the movie, that is the case.
And I also feel like if a religious person watched this, they'd be like, yeah, and she let her guard down for a little bit, became a witch.
Yeah, that's it.
You instantly became a witch.
And this seems to have those kind of Calvinist beliefs of you are evil. You are a sinner already. And all you can do is constantly work on trying to win God's grace.
Yeah.
But they're also fatalists, so your salvation is already predetermined, I think. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me, but
a lot.
It's not for me. Calvinism is not for me.
Well, we can check that one off the checklist. I also think Puritanism is not for me.
No.
Are there still Puritans?
I don't think they're called Puritans anymore, but I think you can draw a line from the Puritans to so many other current denominations. It's a pretty straight line from Puritan to Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
A lot of them, really. But
I guess there's the Amish and stuff who still live a lot like that.
Sure.
Very similarly with just a few modern updates, but stuff like that, I guess still exists. Yeah.
Really, evangelicals have a lot of this stuff still
going.
True,
very true.
I think you couldn't survive because of how uncozy the clothes are, mostly.
I know. I was looking at what they were wearing, and I was like,
oh, doesn't it seem like the worst?
You would be so much faster and more comfortable if you were just wearing leggings and a t-shirt.
Of course, that would be your reading.
Yeah. Everything just looked so scratchy.
And of course, because it's Eggers, it's all hand woven and appropriate materials to the time, so it probably was terrible.
Oh, it probably felt awful. Your skin would just constantly be red.
Yeah. You don't have any lotion.
No.
Oh my God.
No. And
I couldn't live in a pre-lotion society. But with all the clothing talk, it does seem that in this movie, it seems so apparent to us because, of course, the clothes are so big and bulky. But nudity is like a point of freedom in this movie, right? It's constantly used like that. First, we can see, I think there's only 2 indigenous people we see.
Yeah,
and
they like walk by at the town.
Yeah, and they're bare-chested and presumably flourishing because, they know how to do things there. They're doing well.
Yeah.
Or at least they have been until, the Puritans arrive. The baby is naked at the beginning. Well, I guess that's not a good thing because then it's getting sacrificed. The witches, of course, are naked and free, and they're seemingly flourishing as well. The brother returns naked before he dies.
Mm-hmm. And he's, bewitched at that point, so...
And he seems to die in a state of euphoria, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting, that he seemed to, enjoy it.
Yeah. Isn't that a very Puritan thing that you're now going to God, right?
Yeah.
That life is terrible and you hate it and everyone hates it, but then you get eternal heaven afterwards.
Yeah.
So I guess that makes sense for him, too.
Yeah, I guess.
And then, of course, Thomasin is nude when she leaves the family and joins the witches.
Yeah, because she's chosen a new cult.
To go live deliciously.
Yeah. I like that he tempted her with a pretty dress, because that probably would have gotten me too. I'd be like, yeah, I want a pretty dress.
I want to live deliciously and see the world.
I want butter and a dress.
Yeah.
I'm in.
I think this is the second podcast where your introduction name had to do with eating butter.
Probably.
I can't remember the other one, but it was recent.
I love butter. It's my favorite.
And then another reading one could have of this is that many of the signs of sorcery and the supernatural are actually hallucinations and poisoning. Mm-hmm. Have you probably know about the actual witch trial stuff and the theory of this? And
how the way that they were storing their grain was causing a certain kind of bacteria or mold or something. Ergot, yeah. And it was causing mass hysteria, basically, or hallucinations, and causing a certain number of the population to act out in a way that would signify ergot poisoning.
So ergot poisoning would cause hallucinations and convulsions, and it could be easily argued that that would fuel hysteria. And you could say that maybe things like William's obsession with chopping wood would be part of that kind of mania. Yeah. The mom's idea of nursing her dead children, that hallucination she has. Yeah, absolutely. That could be that too. Caleb has hallucinations and then convulsions. Yeah. And then eventually the way the family turns on each other and starts attacking people.
Yeah, and the way that the little kids are hearing...
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
The goat talk. Yeah. I feel like that. But yeah, that's a thing that makes a lot of sense about the Salem witch trials and this time period, is that because of the way that they lived and everybody was working together for the greater good of the community, everything would have been stored together. So they all would have been eating this moldy bread grain.
And then when she flies at the end, is that a hallucination, or perhaps she's gone mad with grief? Yeah. And is just sort of looking for some sort of liberation, and it's all in her mind. Ooh. What do you think about that?
I think I like the idea that she revolts against this puritanical religion and decides to just be free and goes to be a witch.
Yeah.
I like the literal witch interpretation of this movie. Mm-hmm. That there's that's just what happens in the forest.
That's what happens in the forest? You just turn into a witch?
There's just witches and you just get turned into a witch.
That sounds nice.
It seems fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Except for, you know what gets me though?
What?
The baby grinding.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah. I'd love to fly, but I don't think I could grind a baby to do it.
No, I totally couldn't do that.
I could eat a chicken.
Raw?
No. Barbecue?
No, that's not how you become a witch. I think it involves a lot of raw body fluids.
Whose?
Animal, I assume.
Which fluid? Milk? I could do that.
No, blood.
Raw milk. Yes, I'm in. I will be a witch. And fly
I think
around.
there's a lot of like blood and guts and just body parts.
Depending on the body parts, I might be in.
Okay.
Like, I ate chicken thighs the other day.
No, but like uncooked.
I don't see how cooking it is going to ruin it. I don't think they're eating raw chickens.
I don't know.
I think they're more...
Isn't that like a voodoo thing where they're like bite off heads of chickens?
I think, and of course, not a voodoo expert.
Yeah.
I think you're conflating geeks who were carnival sideshows who would bite the heads off chickens, and voodoo, which does rely on a lot of chicken blood and chicken sacrifice. But I don't believe you're consuming it. They also have a thing, I forget the word now. There's this very specific, I got really into researching a bunch of this way long ago. There's this one type where you create it's a type of altar, and someone out there is going to know about this specific type of voodoo. And you have a lot of like putrid things, and things do rot in there, but you're not consuming them.
Okay.
And as for witches, I don't know. Were they consuming a lot of raw chickens? All you witches out there, write in. Let me know. The witch stuff I know about does not involve eating raw chickens. Okay. I think there might be some sacrificing and some blood stuff.
Yeah.
And like the broom part or the pole. Did you see that when she kind of rubbed the pole with baby business?
Yeah.
And then did what with the pole?
Flu?
Before that.
Oh, I didn't see.
I didn't want to say it. She's kind of, she's not masturbating with it, but she is rubbing her vulva on the pole.
Right.
With the baby stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that is something that, of course, everything about witchcraft from this time is 80% scared people making stuff up.
Yes.
But there is some like actual paganism that kind of gets mixed into this. So who knows? Yeah. But the popular belief is, well, the Puritan belief is that they would rub dead babies or whatever else on their broom to make them fly. And then there's a lot of belief that this comes from an actual practice where people would rub, I'm not sure what, something that could be a hallucinogenic, and they would rub that on their pole, and a woman would actually rub it on her vulva, and from that absorb the hallucinogenic and like trip out and have like a good party around the fire.
Right.
Like that was an actual thing. So I think those two things kind of got conflated together because someone who is scared of a devil being everywhere is going to see a naked woman around a fire and be like, yeah, eating babies.
Totally.
Total baby eater there.
And I feel like a lot of their beliefs about witches were rumor.
Oh, of course.
Like someone was like,
one person says it and everyone's like, yeah, I saw that too.
I heard one time, or like my neighbor back in England said, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, this is what witches are. And then it's just known. And I feel like a large portion of the puritanical culture is just rumors.
Oh, absolutely. Because, again, we both believe that there weren't witches doing all of these things. So how did that start? Just one person said it and everyone else was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the witch stuff, we can get a little bit into witch history, and we're not going to give like a big full history, but I think what we can talk about a little bit about is because this movie, I would argue, and I think you're with me, is a lot about how women are blamed for things and their power is taken away in any way that is possible.
Yeah.
That's what people are trying to do. That's what organizations like the church or whatever, in this case, just the church and then the family unit is doing, all these patriarchal structures that are trying to do. And the belief in witches definitely comes from that. Of course, this is all more Europe than in what's present-day America, because that's where the real witch trials were. Like in Germany is where the vast majority of actual witch trials were. But it often came down to women who were practicing some sort of healing. That's where a lot of this comes from. Whether it's birth control of some form or midwifery?
Midwifery.
Is that what the word would be? Midwifery. Because so many religious groups, like the Puritans, believed that the pain a woman feels in childbirth is punishment for the sins of Eve, which which is so fucked up.
It's
first
so
of
fucked
all.
up.
So that if someone is trying to lessen that pain, it is a crime against God in their mind, right? So these beliefs are definitely present in this movie, and I don't want to go too much into it, but you can see how it's carried over into the modern Western world, where in so much of America, birth control is now illegal in so many different
absolutely.
ways. Things that give women autonomy over their own bodies or any sort of empowerment are seen as evil or a threat or straight out illegal in a lot of states.
And there's so many religions now that like the way to keep women complacent and within the religion is to keep them pregnant.
Right, that too.
Because you can't leave if you're like pregnant and tied to a religion. So
yeah. And then you can look at all of this distrust of medicine going back to Europe and the birth of witches and how that has gone over to the Christian right in our time, and their distrust of medicine and science. There's a straight line there. That's all coming from the same thing. And it's scary to see that the witch trial stuff is perfectly well and alive today.
Absolutely.
And then the presentation of witches is always, they're either one of two things, right? They're the hideous hag or they're the beautiful seductress. Just like in so much religious text, they are, and, you know, movies, modern society, in so many ways, they're either the virgin or the whore, right?
Yes.
We don't have the middle ground for female characters in movies a lot of the time, just as with witches. And I kind of loved the presentation of witches in this movie, because I can't think of the last time I saw a straight up witch, right? Like, witch is something that's kind of so old and overdone that if you're doing something with a witch in it, you have to have like this is a new take on it. This is wicked. What if we're seeing it? It's a musical, but it's from the point of view of the Wicked Witch. That's a fun, new, interesting thing.
Yeah.
To go straight like this movie does with a straight up like cackling old crone witch, which I haven't seen in a long time, and they go straight for that. And just like with the goat, like, oh, who is the evil presence here? Is it the black goat that looks like a devil? Yeah. It is.
Yeah, it totally is.
It's so straightforward, and I really appreciate that about this movie, because it's not working on surprising you in that way. Just like how when we start off this movie, once we show you all of the bad things, like here is the witch. Yes, she looks just like you'd think a scary witch looks. And we're straight out starting this movie with infanticide in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And not a lot of movies start off with infanticide right off the beginning.
Nope.
I think it's just this.
Very few.
And Face Off.
Oh.
In Face Off, Travolta's kid gets killed right away.
Oh.
But anyways, I like movies that make different choices than most movies make. And in this one, we have the baby Samuel disappears right away. And I feel like in most movies, we would spend time looking for the baby, or like, oh, it's around this corner, he's around this corner. Or there'd be some jump scares and some misdirects on the way. But that's how this movie differs from a lot of horror. And that's another thing. Everyone's like, this isn't a horror movie. I wasn't scared.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah, you don't need to like prove how tough you are based on how scared you were in this movie.
And
also, if you need to prove how tough you are, you're never going to admit that you were scared.
Also categorizing movies to be like, this is this and this isn't, so therefore I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. I love this movie.
It's a good movie.
That's how this differs from a lot of other horror, because it's not just the tension of what happened. It's showing you exactly what happened. In this case, that baby being, ground up and spread all over a witch. It's less about what happened and more, it's showing you what happened and just making you live with it, right? It's not surprising in a lot of ways. It is the typical witch. It is the typical evil presence. And there's still a lot to be said for the unknown being scarier than the known. That's usually how I feel with most movies. But this movie isn't afraid of showing exactly what happens, making things quite explicitly, and just making you just sit there and think about it. And that this, because of all the attention to detail, because Eggers, we listened to a little bit of the commentary, and of course all he talks about is like what wood the ladder was made out of, because that's the kind of guy he is. Of course he's a brilliant writer because he wrote this, and I think it's great. But he's so into that authenticity. And sometimes I feel like those can be wasted efforts. Like, what do I get by knowing that's an authentic period ladder?
Yeah.
I don't gain anything from that. But maybe the sum of all of that, by making everything so real, when we then have something like baby's blood being rubbed on a broom, that feels real too. Mm-hmm. And that's where the terror of this movie comes in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And then that's the same with like those very typical things. Like there's no surprise about what the witch looks like. It's exactly what you would think a scary witch would look like. But in this world and how this movie is constructed, without having all of these, I know you wanted more to it, but I think by reining it in, these icons of horror, like a witch that looks like this, like a black goat, they come through so much stronger, to me at least. I get what you're saying about like, I want more of the witch. I want more of the scary things.
Yeah.
I didn't. And I think a lot of it comes through my new reading about just following along Thomason's story. And then I'm like, why do I need all this scary stuff? I'm in it for Thomason's journey.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to how I don't enjoy super slow movies as much as you do. And like, I get it. Like, I have an appreciation for this movie, but I don't love the slowness of some movies.
Fair.
And
again, I don't think it was slow though.
And I say that I think that's a flaw on me because I feel like there's so many things I start and within the first like 15 minutes I stop watching it, like things on Netflix and stuff, because I'm like, it's just like not getting to the point. I'm not hooked. And so I just let it go. I feel like you give more of a chance.
Maybe I just see a different point.
Yeah.
So I would agree when there's things that don't get to the point. Like if you are making a popcorn horror and you're not showing me you're not giving me the scares. Yeah, I don't have patience for that. But I think what this movie is trying to do, or at least what worked for me, is done in that slowness. It is done in that world building and the family drama. Because to me, at least, maybe it's because I've watched it multiple times now, but the family drama is the key to me more than the supernatural. And then the supernatural comes in as a kind of release at the end of the movie. So, and I get that's why a lot of people didn't like this movie, because you're expecting one thing and you're not getting that. Instead, you're getting the horror of puritanical life. And I feel like the slowness of the movie is essential to demonstrating that type of life.
Yeah, I get that.
Let's talk a little bit about what you had mentioned earlier, and that is nature or the wilderness being one of the threats of this movie too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout this, you get the idea of like, the rule is don't go in the forest. And I feel like there are so many horror-based things or like supernatural-based things where that is the rule. Like, don't go in the forest. That's where the bad things are. And it's like on you if you choose to go in there. You probably will die. And so I feel like so much of the Puritan culture is like fear of the outside. Like even in the beginning when they're leaving Puritan town, you see that
I think it's Plymouth Plantation.
Oh, is
which
it?
Was an actual place. I think it is. Did
Okay.
I mention that? I'm not sure.
It doesn't say on the Wikipedia, so it just says New England. So
Okay.
I didn't assume that it had a name, but we'll call it Plymouth Plantation then. So as they're leaving, you see that like the town site or the plantation has a wall around it to keep the outside from getting in, and also probably to keep the inside from getting out. But I think that kind of goes throughout the movie with the woods, and how the husband is lying to the wife saying that, oh yeah, we never go in the woods, and then he's hunting in the woods in order to keep the family alive. And also it's kind of proved right because the witch is in the woods. And I think that it's like a good addition because like the fear of the unknown was such a huge part of their religion.
Absolutely. Well said.
It felt really rambly to me, but
oh, I feel rambly all the time, and then you say I made sense, so that's all.
You do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all of that, and then it also is creating that isolation of this movie.
Yeah.
Because so much of a modern horror, one of the hardest parts is, why don't they call the cops? Why don't they use their phone?
Yeah.
Right? You always had to write a way out of that.
Yeah.
And when you get people in isolated situations
Yeah.
like this, because they, first of all, they're isolated from their people,
Yeah.
moving from England to Plymouth. Now this family is further isolated from those people because they are they've been excommunicated or banished or whatever it is, and there's nowhere to go.
No.
You have nowhere to run to because they have this forest around them that is the mother sees as a threat instantly. And it's, I think so much of the best horror is in that isolation, going from your Alien to The Shining, right? They can't get out of that place.
Yeah.
And that's where that horror lives. Actually, there's a lot between this and The Shining. Oh, wow. Yeah, when you think about it,
It's true.
It's the family drama. Maybe there's supernatural stuff. Maybe people are just going crazy.
And the isolation and
Creepy twins.
creepy twins. I also just wanted to say, because like if you hadn't figured it out already, I listen to a lot of things about cults and extreme religion, and I find it really interesting. Isolation is a huge part of both of those.
It breaks you down.
It breaks you down. It stops you from understanding the world outside of you, and that fear of the unknown is a large part of why people are so like brainwashed into these places, is because they have no frame of reference of anything else that's happening. And yeah, so I think that's really interesting how big a theme it is in this movie.
And I think you are doing a good job of connecting all of those things of actual psychology of how people are in our modern society and broken down and indoctrinated or whatever it is.
Indoctrinated, that's the word I was looking for.
And then seeing how this director is using those things that are psychological, not triggers, but psychological links that we have, and using that in a movie.
Yeah.
That's why I think there are some directors who have that next level. It's not just speaking in the formal language of film, but speaking to something more intrinsic in humanity, like things that we recognize as being scary or happy or joyful or whatever it is. In this case, terror-inducing. He recognizes things that people have in them that we might not always be able to articulate ourselves.
Yeah.
But when we see them on screen, we know it's scary, even if you don't always know why it's scary. And I think we're ruining it now by like, let's talk about why is it scary? Like all those shots of the woods.
Yeah.
I love that when they show the woods, it's just a super slow creep forward, like just a nice little, I don't know if he's tracking or dollying or what, but because of that, it makes me look for things. Yeah. It makes me think, what's going to pop out of there? Maybe that's because that's how we've been conditioned for other movies, but maybe it's just seeing still woods like that. There's something in us going back to when we had to fear from predators, right? That we have a fear. And if it's stillness like that, why is it so still? All the birds have stopped because there's something out there to get us. Yeah. And he does such a good job with those shots of the woods. The woods are always taking up such a huge part of the screen. They're looming, they're ominous, they're always there. And then there's so much of the symbolic conflict between civilization and nature in this movie too, because the greatest hubris perhaps of the Puritans is not just that this religion is going to save us all, but it's that we can just go there and conquer. Yeah. We can take over this land. It's like, I can live anywhere. And the same with, I forgot his name already. The dad. William. Same with William, right?
Looking at you, colonizers.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So, of course, the most basic way is that they live next to this dark forest. It's tied to witchcraft. And that is a very immediate conflict with nature that's right there. And then we get into the nudity stuff because that is always seen as evil, but nudity is natural.
It's part of life.
It is the most natural a person could be, but here nudity is associated with the monstrous, with the uncivilized, with heathens or hedonism or all of that sort of stuff. Which, of course, to me, I'm like, yeah, that sounds sweet. But to them, it is evil and things to be feared. Just as the sexual liberties of women to them are evil and things to be feared. Which, again, to me, are like, yeah, it's sweet. And William is constantly trying to conquer this wilderness. He doesn't really make any attempts to go, like, kill a witch.
No.
That never comes up.
No, there's no hunt in this movie.
Well, there is. We'll get into that later.
I mean, there's no...
The mom is definitely hunting witches.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, there is no day
Thomason.
when they go out and, like, hunt down the witch in the woods.
Yeah. But he is battling with nature constantly, and he's failing, right? He can't grow corn. He can't hunt that hare, which is the witch, I assume, right?
Yes, yeah.
At the time, hares were just as associated with the devil as goats were.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a good little thing in there, too, because we know Eggers does his homework.
It's true.
I'm diverging again, but we didn't talk about much of the production of this movie, but really briefly, he researched and wrote for 5 years before
5 years.
making the movie. He was a guy that did a lot of, as you could probably tell from this, a lot of art direction and things for movies. So this was the first movie he ever wrote and directed. He had some shorts that I don't know about, but he did a lot of other things in movies, and you could tell that he has that keen eye for set stuff, especially. So he does a lot of art decoration. Then he wanted to make this movie. Nobody would fund it. He researched and rewrote for 5 years, eventually got funding at $4 million, which is very low budget for a feature at this point in time. But got it made, mostly was shot in Ontario. There were some pickups that they shot in actual Massachusetts, but they couldn't afford to do it there.
Right.
And then he went to some festivals, and then A24 bought it. So this is not like a production by them. I've read a lot of people being like, oh, typical A24, they have to do this. Like, no, he existed. This movie existed.
This movie existed before.
And then they came in and bought it. So it came out in festivals a year before it was seen anywhere else. So when I said I saw it in 2015, it was probably actually 2016 because I saw it in just a regular movie theater in Edmonton.
Right. Yeah, it came out January 27, 2015 in Sundance.
Yes.
And then from February 19th, 2016 in the US.
So in Sundance, it's where it was sold. And
right.
A24 bought it, and they bought the distribution rights.
Huh, okay.
Going back to whatever I was talking about, the wilderness?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so
Literal
William is
hunts.
trying to conquer the wilderness. He can't grow corn; it's all moldy or whatever it is. He hasn't finished thatching his roof. He's failing at his attempt of conquering nature, and I like that when he is in moments of weakness, when he feels impotent or powerless, he always goes and chops wood. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, this is the only thing he can do. He's failed at his manly and fatherly duties. And the only way he can conquer this wilderness that is destroying his family is to cut down a tree and chop the wood. That's the only part of wilderness and of this whole world that he has any control over. And this might be a comment on the Protestant work ethic. If you read a lot of older literature, there's a popular narrative that Protestant work ethic is what built America. And of course, we know it's, slavery and taking advantage of other people. But there's some Protestant work ethic in there. But his Protestant work ethic is what kills him, right? Yeah. When he's knocked down by Black Phillip, the wood all falls on him.
Yeah.
And I like that little symbol.
Yeah.
Or maybe you could say that he's crushed beneath his own masculine pride, but it's something in there.
It's something along those lines for sure. I can see that.
And just the idea that you cannot conquer nature.
Right.
I like that in here too.
Yeah.
What about the visual look of this movie? It is very distinct. How did you like that?
I appreciate a really well done period piece. And I feel like some of the stuff that I watch, I enjoy because it is very richly decorated. This is like the opposite, and I feel like I appreciate it for the same reason, is because it's got this like truth to it, and this like feeling, like you can feel how scratchy those beds would be, or like you can feel how itchy her dress would be, and you can feel like the damp draftiness of living in that house. And I feel like that's such an important way to get the viewer on the page of the story like really quickly, is by like playing to those like really specific feelings that come along with this time period. And I really appreciated just the attention to detail, and how like anything that you have, you make. Mm-hmm. Except for her mother's silver cup. But
Right.
like, I feel like anything, like you want a ladder, well, you gotta go like find 6 trees and then cut them down and whittle them away so that they're smooth, and somehow attach them. And like, so it's just like the amount of work it would take to have a house like that, with all of the like possessions that they have, you know, that they made absolutely everything themselves.
And when you talk about being able to feel the scratchiness or smell the mustiness, I think that starts lending itself into those horror elements, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you then start throwing a witch into there, you have a similar visceral reaction to that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So in this one also, they only use natural light. It's only, there's no
movie lighting.
No movie lighting, it's just candlelight. And I loved it. I felt so much of the candlelight stuff was my favorite visually, because it looks like all of that Dutch golden age for painting. That's your Rembrandt and stuff like that, those warm tones. And there's definitely a bunch of Goya in there for all you art history people. But that's the most typical thing. Like, of course it's Goya, because he paints, devil goats and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of the period pieces I watch get wrong, is how bright they make everything.
Right.
Because like when you think about it, and I'm listening to a book right now that's set in like Tudor England, and they're talking about like the arrow slits. Those are the windows in the room, are like the arrow slits that they can like defend the castle through, but aren't big enough for an arrow to like sail back through unless you're like a really good shot. And I just think about like how dark it actually would have been.
Yeah.
Because everything's candles and fireplaces. And I just think that this got that really right. Because it's daylight, and you do most of your working in the light because you don't have a way to see outside. And like the hesitancy of Thomasin going out to feed the goats at night after everything's dark and they've kind of shut down the farm.
Just moonlight, that'd be terrifying.
It would be terrifying, and it would be dangerous too.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have a way of transporting light with her to keep herself safe and see where she's stepping. And I think that also adds a scariness to this movie, because you like physically cannot light the night up and make it feel safer. So there's like the darkness is scary as well.
And then even when we are in daylight, every moment of this movie is overcast and drab.
Yeah.
There's no sunny days.
No.
There are no blue skies or green grass. For a movie that takes place out in the wilderness, you'd expect green and blue.
Yeah.
None of either of them.
No.
That's one thing I might take a little bit of an issue with. I thought it was a little too desaturated and low contrast. I know that's for a good effect, and a lot of people very much love it, but I would go a little more contrast and a little more saturation. I know it's supposed to be drab, but it was a little too drab for me.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, speaking of color, that I noticed, and we see the witch once in her like seductress form.
Wearing which color?
Wearing red.
Of course.
And wearing very like unnatural colors. Like
the only other time we're gonna see that is in the blood.
Exactly. And Thomasin and her mother are wearing these like drab kind of natural colors.
Yeah.
And that's because like dyeing clothing just like wasn't a thing unless you were rich or evil. And so when we see the witch, she's wearing like a silk bodice, and like she's wearing very rich looking fabrics.
She's living deliciously.
And she's wearing a lot of things that you probably would have seen in England, and part of the reason why the Puritans left was this kind of like wealth of things and fabrics and that kind of thing. And so I think it's really fun that we get to see the witch tempting Caleb away, because she's dressed in a way that is like totally opposite to how the Puritans are dressed, and she's like done up in this like beautiful way, and that would be seen as like pridefulness and like sinful, and she is literally sin.
That's another shining similarity. A beautiful temptress who turns out to be old and decrepit.
Yeah.
A lot of shining.
Interesting.
And then I think the visuals, we might get into Bergman and Dreyer one day. Those are a little less accessible, but if you watch the works of Carl Theodor Dreyer, you'll see a lot of this stuff too.
Okay.
I feel like this has been 4-hour movies where I really like to get into it and like see a bunch of stuff. I feel like this has been a very disjointed effort at that. And maybe that is some of the criticisms of the movie, is like they're just kind of doing all sorts of stuff and there's lots of good things, but does it actually make one big cohesive thing at the end? And maybe that's something that I could see as a criticism of it. And we talked about his movie, The Lighthouse, as well, which again, I loved. You like this better than The Lighthouse, though, right?
Oh, way better, yeah.
Okay.
way better.
I liked both of them very much. And The Lighthouse had so many things where it's like, and this means this, and this means this. And I had a great time doing that. But is there one overarching thing I'm not as sure about? Or perhaps what I think is probably the case is just that I miss it.
Right.
I think that's a good opportunity. But since we're kind of all over the place, do you have just little things you wanted to bring up that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Yeah. I don't know. On the thing that you were just saying, I think that this movie does a good job of like, if you don't know as much about the Salem witch trials and like extreme religion and what was happening in England at that time, you can watch this movie and still enjoy it. And not see all the things, right? Like it's still like a spooky movie. I think because we have this like wealth of knowledge on a few subjects that come up in this, that this movie ends up being a lot of different things. And I think as the average viewer who may not have that knowledge, I don't think that they would get stuck in that kind of thing.
That's fair. And also this movie is, of course, a product of our world because it was made in 2015. But the story is not a product of the Salem witch trials and everything like that. It's a precursor to all of that. And I think that's important too, because you know what? I may have just thought of something that maybe I'll figure out and I'll talk about at the end. But this is the story that those people would have heard.
Right.
Okay, I think I got it now. I think I might have understood the movie.
Okay.
Other little things in here, though.
Yes.
I thought the hardest part of this movie to watch, although I forgot about the baby. I don't know how I forgot about that.
That was hard.
But was the mother attacking Thomason.
Yes.
That was a brutal scene.
And that's something that you see building throughout the movie, though.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, like way earlier, you see the mother start to hate her daughter.
Yes.
Because she is everything, or she's becoming everything, even like not against her will, but like without trying, that the mother isn't anymore. The mother has lost her looks and she is just bearing children now, and that's it. And I think
has lost her last one.
Yeah. And I think you see Thomason with her like life ahead of her, possibly going off to be with another family. And I think that the mother wishes that she could get away too.
Oh, absolutely, because she talks about wanting to go back to England.
Yeah.
But I think that's I don't know if we didn't put a fine enough point on it when we were talking at the beginning about that particular reading, but that is such a great representation of women hating women.
Yeah.
Right? Women being a part of that patriarchal structure. And in this way, it manifests itself in jealousy. Like, just as the witch is that dichotomy of, like, we don't like the old ugly crone, we don't like the sexually liberated temptress. Those are the two forms of evil. That is so much of what so much of the world thinks of the evil of women, is like, we don't want this overly sexual person, and then once you're old, you're useless to us.
Yeah, exactly.
And she is becoming that first part. She's getting into her sexual maturity and is seen as a threat.
Yeah.
Not just, this should be a time where she is being celebrated as becoming a woman, but in the world, becoming a woman is a threat.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm really just kind of going with that one reading because that's what works for me. And since you agree, we don't have a different argument against that. But to me, most of this movie is a representation of how the Puritan world saw women, with how the family treated her, each different person seeing her as a threat or evil in a different way, and then drawing those links to our present world where all of that is still happening. I think that's the clearest theme to me, at least. But when she has to kill her own mother, of course, it's a commentary on all of that, but her mother turning on her, that is. But then when she has to stop her mother and kill her in doing so, and she's saying, I love you, as her mother is strangling her, and she has no choice but to kill her. That was brutal. And it's almost maybe a commentary on how the biggest betrayal is women who are misogynists themselves. Right? Because, like, we expect it from dudes. They've been doing this. But you're on our side.
You're
and
a woman.
The mom should be someone. It should be her champion in this. A mother should do that for her daughter, and she's the furthest from that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that was a brutal scene.
Yeah.
And that led into another thing that I really enjoyed about this movie, are those little quiet moments. There's like little eye of the storm moments. Like when they get locked in the pen together and the kids are like, are you a witch? I'm not a witch. And it's just kind of like quiet and still for a moment, because like that is this world. And of course you had issue with how quiet it is before that, but that's the world they live in.
True.
And I loved it when it took place between those moments of action. And then after she kills her mom, she lays there for a bit, and then she goes and gets undressed, another kind of becoming more natural and leaving her Puritan world behind, and she goes to sleep. And I love that. It's just such a great human touch and a change of pace that I know a lot of people have issues with the pacing of this movie. I do not. I think it was great, but it's a moment for this human who's been going through so much to just try to recuperate from all of it.
Yeah, she goes through a lot at the end of the movie, and even like throughout the movie. But it's nice to see her have kind of an ending, that she's found like a group of people that you assume aren't going to be as restrictive as her parents. And I felt like a sense of relief as she was walking off to the witches.
Okay, let's wait. I want to wait on the ending till the end.
Okay.
Do you have any other last things before we get into
really.
the end?
We've kind of talked about everything that I had.
One question I had is, so you don't believe that Thomasin was corrupted earlier in the movie and was working for the devil or the witch or whatever it is?
No.
I agree. Who has signed the book?
What do you mean?
So you signed the book, of course, to your contract with the devil.
Yes.
Thomasin does it at the end of the movie. Has anyone else in this movie signed the book?
I don't think so. Like just the witch, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I assume that the coven has all signed the books. I don't think anybody in her family has.
I think the mother has.
You think so?
So she is distraught. Her child is dead. She wants to go back to England. And then
she wants her old life back.
Her second child dies.
Yeah.
And she has that hallucination where both of her children come back to her.
Right.
I think, now there's all those other readings, like maybe it's grief, maybe it's ergot poisoning, whatever. But I think that at her weakest, the devil tempts her with what she wants most. And what would she want most? To see her children.
Yeah.
So I think in a scene that we don't see, she signs the book. Maybe it presents itself very differently to her, but she makes some sort of contract because we see her have that dream with her 2 children, and they're both back, and she's breastfeeding her child. And then that cuts to a raven or a crow pecking at her breast, which is that's an old folklore thing of if you are feeding, I think it's usually birds, but I think it's also like goats, cats, whatever, like all the familiars of the devil. That is a contract with the devil.
Yes.
So I think she has made that contract. Either she made the contract to get that hallucination and then believes that is what happened.
Yeah.
Or that hallucination itself is the devil trying to get the contract because the suckling is the contract itself.
Yeah, I could also see an argument for her having signed the book when she was younger and now she's trying to atone throughout her life and also push the blame off of herself, which is why she's accusing Thomasin.
Interesting.
She's like, it's not me, it's the girl. And it clearly isn't me, and I definitely didn't do anything wrong.
And then I think the father has not.
No, I don't think so.
I
think he... poor man is just like being driven mad by his circumstances.
What I think is a nice touch is they don't make him so evil. Like he's not, clearly he has made mistakes and is bad at being a dad.
Yes.
But they could very easily have made him be this tyrant who's hating everyone, and that would kind of elicit a lot of sympathy for Thomasin, even more so.
Yeah.
But we don't need it from there.
No.
In his way, I believe he's trying to do his best.
Right.
I think that's true.
Yes.
And even when the twins accuse Thomasin of being a witch, he doesn't believe it. He's like, no, promise me you're not. Okay, you're not. I believe you.
Yeah.
So he's on the scale of the people in the family. He's on the good side. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he has. And then he does, of course, have that moment of repentance where he is, his sin would be pride, of course. The mother's sin would be envy, I guess. And I think they're all sinners in their own way. Only Thomasin admits it at the beginning.
True.
What about the twins?
They did
What of the twins is them being bad kids? What is them actually being affected by the devil? And what, or have they made a deal with the devil?
I don't think they've made a deal with the devil. I think it kind of harkens back to like the supernatural idea of children being more conducive to seeing that kind of thing, like more conductive to like supernatural things.
Sure.
Because they have like untouched minds or like whatever. And I think they are seeing or like hearing the devil or having conversations with him because at that point they are the only ones the devil can communicate with because they are young.
But isn't having that back and forth communication a sort of contract with the devil? Because it's not always you're going to sell your soul and you're going to be a witch.
Yeah. It
can be like, yeah, join with me and we're just going to have fun and play.
Yeah.
I feel like they've gotten that far. Because
True.
Have they actually been hearing Black Phillip is my question.
I think they have.
So then they have been talking to the devil and not telling anyone.
True.
That's something.
Yeah.
For a Puritan, if you're just hanging out talking with the devil.
Yeah. Talking with someone. Maybe they don't know that he's the devil.
But living the way they live, if a goat's talking to you,
yeah,
they would know that there's something up with that.
True.
It's been ingrained into them, I'm sure. So I think there's something there for sure. Mm-hmm. Do you know what happens to them at the end?
No.
Me neither. They're just gone.
They're just gone. We just assume that they are dead.
I have no idea. I wish, that's one thing I wish. I wish I had something about that.
Yeah.
Even if I just saw the dead bodies or something and I didn't know how they died, but I feel like there should be something. Or maybe that is part of it. Maybe because they have had a contract, they didn't need to be killed.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that we don't see their bodies lends to the idea that they have made a pact with Black Phillip.
And then they're safe.
safe for now
elsewhere.
until they die and go to hell.
Yeah.
I assume, is that what happens? I don't know.
I assume so.
Caleb, I think, has resisted it, right? He didn't sign any book.
No.
I think that he, of course, his sin would be lust because he doesn't really do anything too bad, but he like looks at his sister a little bit.
And I think that's just a natural part of maturing, right?
Yeah, for sure. He's curious and confused because he has, of course, no context for any of the feelings he is feeling.
And I think the only thing that he's been taught is that like sexuality is bad.
Yeah.
Like
he probably doesn't even know what literally sexuality is.
No, it's just like
that's why there's so many people
the hormones of being a like preteen boy.
Yeah. So his sin is lust. The witch attempts to bring him in by being this beautiful woman and kissing him. But it seems to me like he fought it off.
Yeah.
Because then when he dies, first of all, that scene was one of the single greatest performances I've seen. His death scene when he gives that speech about Jesus and he's euphoric. Yeah. That was amazing. It was fantastic. That kid was so good. I don't know what else I could say, but it's very impressive. But when he is having that speech, that also seems sexual. Mm-hmm. He, like, the sounds he makes are of pleasure.
Yes, yeah.
And he is talking about Jesus's lap and bathing in his blood. It's all very sensuous stuff. Yeah. And I don't know what to make from that. I don't have anything clever to say, like, oh, because he was lustful and then that's his salvation. I don't know. I have nothing. But he is kind of ruled by lust, I think we could say, or will be. Well, now he won't because he's dead.
No, he's dead. But yeah.
And then he coughs up the apple.
Yeah. And like the apple is like a classic sign of witch, right? Like back in like fairy tales and stuff.
Oh, you're going like Snow White apple.
Yeah. And that's.
Oh, I was going Garden of Eden apple.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense too.
Like there's so many original sins. I can't keep track with Christianity, but that was like the big sin, right? Was Eve ate the forbidden fruit and that was their being casted away from the Garden of Eden. And you could argue that first the Puritans were cast away from England and now they have been cast away from the plantation. So there's those themes. You could say that he's always talking about an apple tree. There's this mythic apple tree that never happened. So then that could come into his lying. You could make an argument that when he and Thomason go out into the forest, there's a bunch of Adam and Eve stuff there. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. There's so much. There's so much.
There's so much.
But yeah, and then you're talking about the fairy tale stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of an apple, like the temptation of an apple, which I think also like stems from the Garden of Eden and like biblical stuff. But you get the idea that like an innocent gift like that is your undoing and that it comes from evil. Yeah. So don't accept apples from strangers.
In the Bible, they never say it's an apple.
Oh, true.
I think it's a pomegranate from how it sounds, but whatever. I don't know where the Garden of Eden was located, so I don't know what their local fruit is. Although I guess they had everything.
Yeah, I think it was like a conglomeration of all of God's
maybe then it was like a papaya.
Oh, maybe. Mango.
If that's all it takes to get you kicked out, man, I could be tempted with fruit very easily.
Oh, yeah. Fruit is your
If just some guy was like, hey, want this mango? I'd be like, yes, and I would eat it.
I feel like wine is how I'm tempted.
Made from
like,
fruit.
Hey, you want a glass of wine? Yeah, true. Fruit wine.
One other little thing I have written down is that, you know how you were talking about like your goth, quote unquote, goth phase was just watching Interview with a Vampire?
Yeah.
Mine was appropriate for the type of nerd I am. I learned about Enochian and stuff. So Enochian is a language that they claimed was what angels spoke, but they did write the entire language. The witches at the end are chanting in Enochian.
Oh, are they?
And that's an interesting thing because I'm sure I don't really know that much about this, but if it's the language of the angels to have these servants of the devil speaking in it is an interesting dissonance. And maybe like a lot of this movie, it's saying that our ideas of good and evil are much more of a horseshoe.
Right.
They come together
Yeah.
in the end.
Yeah.
Because the extreme good as it's portrayed is terrible in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like a lot to think about.
There's so much.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing such a bad job of actually making any points. It's just a lot of, what about this? And I feel like I could go on for what about this is for another couple of hours. But
Forever.
we should get to the ending.
Yeah, I think so.
So my first and maybe my second watch through, my biggest criticism of this movie was the ending.
Yes.
I didn't like how explicit it was. And I always talk about how I love movies that exist in those gray areas that leave everything to the imagination. And in the past, I thought that they shouldn't have shown the witch so much early on.
Oh.
And this time, it was very different. This time, I loved the ending. This time, I was overjoyed with the ending. And remember, I clapped.
Yeah, you did. You clapped at the end.
I was in the right state of mind, if
Indy's
you know what I mean.
Indy's a movie clapper now.
I am so silent in every movie, and I don't like to tip my hand of what I'm going to talk about on the podcast.
Yes, like we don't, like I think we've said this before. When we watch a movie, we often don't chat a lot during the movie, and then also we just like move on to other things right after we're done moving.
And we don't talk about whether we liked it or not, because that's what the podcast is for. But I couldn't help it. I was in the exact right place, and I loved that ending. And I think because this time I watched this as Thomason's movie.
Right.
In the past, it was a horror movie about supernatural forces, fucking with a family. And this time, I think the title made so much more sense to me. Because the first time I see the title, The Witch, and right away I see the witch. And you're like, okay, that's the movie. This movie is about that witch. It's not. The witch is Thomason.
Yeah.
The story is Thomason's. And when you watch it that way, it's so much more enjoyable. And thinking that this ending, which I thought was too much before, is the culmination of this woman who has been the victim of every disservice you could imagine. This woman who is the stand-in for women everywhere and how they are unfairly treated. And now we get to see her. I get it that it is her fall to a lot of people, but when you're on the journey with Thomason, this is her liberation. Others see this as a story of a girl being manipulated into doing the devil's bidding, but I think that's a disservice to what she has gone through and how her character has grown, because she's been taken from her homeland, taken from everything she knows. She lives out there. She's blamed for everything. And we never see her laugh in this movie. She laughs at the beginning when she's playing peekaboo.
Yeah.
And now we get to see her. Her face is illuminated in orange, one of the few colors we get to see. And she's euphoric. She's
got like joy on her face.
And it's so hard for me, even with everything we've seen, it's so hard for me to condemn her as failing or being lost at this point. It seems to me like this character has been found. And I thought it was beautiful. I just loved it so much.
I love the ending of this movie, and I think it really wraps up the entire thing of her struggle throughout this movie and finding someone who, or like a group of someone's who accept her. And that where she, like the idea that she floats without doing this like ritual. She
free
is like found where she's meant to be. And I think that that's a really nice way to end a movie that is full of repression and like strife.
But then is that us having our feminist reading of it taking over too much? Because we are cheering for someone who has signed her soul to the devil?
Yeah.
Or is that the brilliance of this movie, that it can make you cheer for that? It can start off with a baby being ground up and then have you cheer for someone who is then choosing that life.
Yeah.
That's a big stretch.
It is a big stretch. But
But it gets you there, right?
It gets you there. It totally gets you there. And by the end, you're cheering for Thomasine to not be part of this repressed patriarchal society, and that she's getting out to anything is like a happy ending.
Is this just a message to religious people of like, hey, if you push too hard, they're going all the other way.
Yeah.
So quit it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much that could be said about that ending too. Like I don't know where to land on it.
Yeah, me neither. But I liked the ending.
Because it seems like a happy, joyful ending.
It does.
But it's not. Is it? I don't know.
I feel like this is also like a reading of like the witch gets the happy ending.
Which witch?
It's just the witches. That's the happy ending.
Thomasin, it seems, gets a happy ending.
Yeah.
But then if we believe all of their like Calvinist beliefs from early on, that ending, this happiness is not the ending, but rather very short-lived, and then she'll have eternal damnation to pay for her happiness now. And someone like the mother, assuming she didn't sign the book, maybe she did, or the father then, who has damned his whole family.
Yeah.
Not literally, because damnation means a different thing to them, has led to the deaths of his whole family.
Yeah.
He will then be rewarded with eternal happiness in heaven?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who gets the happy ending? Because to a Puritan, your death is not the end, it is the beginning.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And Thomasin, the Thomasin we know has died, and this is a type of resurrection.
A rebirth, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't either, but I like it.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you said something, and I was like, oh, that makes me think about everything, and I have a point now. What did you say?
You expect me to remember what I said?
And then I'll make up a point.
Ooh, I don't know. I can't remember what we were talking about.
The folktale part of it.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. I don't remember the exact point I was making.
Well, I think I had just kind of forgotten about that subtitle,
Right.
A New England Folktale.
Yes. Yeah. So you get like little pieces of fairy tales or like folk tales of like many different stories, I felt like.
I feel like it's less of a look at all these little bits of folktales, but that this is the folktale.
Yeah.
Right? We only see that framing, that title of A New England Folktale at the beginning and the end, but I just kind of dismiss it. I didn't really think about that because I don't think about the title as much when you're watching a movie. No. But when you think about it, it can really color how you look at the movie, because this movie is just that. It's the folktale. This is the tale that will be told over the next few generations. This is the worst case scenario.
Yes.
This is the story that people are going to use at the Salem witch trials to justify things.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that, and I didn't really think about it, that this is the folktale. We are inserting this into the past.
This is the cautionary tale.
Yeah, this is the tale that sets up those roots of religion and that confluence with the misogyny, the jealousy of women who are going to like usurp your roles as an older woman, the blaming of women for corrupting men just by looking how they look. We look at all of those things and we talk about, me and you talk about how this is reflecting of our society now, and that's clever writing. But this is the folktale. So we have to look at this as this was the story that really happened, or the tale, the folktale, that created all of that.
Right.
This is the Puritan nightmare, right? I think Eggers referred to this movie as a Puritan nightmare. This is it, right? This is the witch is real, but also all of those other things are real too. It's kind of like what he's saying in that he has put in that missing piece.
Right.
Like what could have generated all of this terrible stuff? This folktale. He's creating the reason for it.
Right.
Rather than say all of the things that I have learned have led me to write this. He's going before it and saying this happened. This folktale existed in that world, and that created all of the terrible things that would follow after it.
Right.
That kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry, I'm just thinking about it because it's new thought to me. But yeah, no, I think I agree with that.
Maybe that's where we end things.
Maybe. Yeah.
A New England folktale. It's right in the title.
It's a folktale. And this is the worst case scenario. And this is going to push the Puritans who live in the plantation even farther into their religion, because they say, look what happens when you leave the plantation. And then everyone's going to be like, well, I'm never leaving the plantation. I'm never getting myself into a situation where I'm forced to leave the plantation like them.
And if we're in the folktale world, all of the things that they accused her of is kind of true because she becomes a witch at the end.
Yes.
I'm sure the part that she was driven to be a witch, that's always what gets lost, right? So all of the hardship she faced from her own family, all the misogyny that is in this movie is proven like, yeah, exactly. That's what we should do because look what happened.
And that's what happens. Yeah.
It's a folktale.
Wow.
I don't know. Should we just end there? I could talk for a long time, but I also had to get going.
Yeah, you have to go to hockey and we have to eat dinner between now and then. So I think this is a good place to end.
So one last thing, though. I still love this movie. I think it's beautifully made. We didn't talk nearly enough about the acting, but we could shortly say that everyone is amazing. We didn't even talk about Anya Taylor-Joy's performance, which was just
everyone in this movie
great.
Was incredible. She was shockingly great. This is so her good. Debut performance, and she seems like someone who's been acting for years already.
She was amazing.
Yeah.
One of the best performances I've seen in one of the movies we've done on here in quite some time. And then, what's his name? Scrimshaw, the Caleb.
Yeah.
Amazing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of them were great.
Everyone was great.
But let's wrap up because we will talk for a very long time.
Forever.
And, I was going to say the one last thing I wanted to ask you was, what do you think now? You're still at a 7 out of 10?
I'll give it like a 7.5 out of 10.
Oh, you gained that 0.5.
Yeah.
Wow. If you watched this movie and were like a 7.5, what I suggest to you, and I know this is a very hard sell if you only liked a movie 7 out of 10, and it's not the easiest movie, watch it again. It gets so much better. It gets better every time I watch it. I think I may have peaked because how could it be better than that last time? I loved it so much.
Yeah, I think watching it again definitely has its merits. We accidentally watched it all over again today before we recorded because we usually like to review a little bit and then we ended up just watching the whole thing. But
not like a real watch because
we were doing stuff still, but it was still on.
Getting reacquainted with the plot.
I feel like there were things that I noticed that I didn't the first time around. So I think it's definitely worth a rewatch. And maybe you'll want to rewatch it after you hear what we had to say.
Yeah, go watch it right now. And is that the end of Spooktober?
This is the end of Spooktober.
All right. What do we got coming up for November is next? Yeah.
Yeah.
November doesn't have a fun name because we don't know what it's going to be yet. What's it going to be, Samantha?
So our theme for November is going to be my favorite musical.
It's specifically my favorite musical and not just musicals?
I guess it's just musicals.
Okay.
But like, I Love This, You Should Too should be the one that you love. So.
Right. I just want to make sure that the entire month was not devoted to your specific favorite musical.
No.
Okay.
Just musicals. Sorry.
Okay.
The theme is musicals.
All right. It's going to be Musical November. We will think of a way to combine those two words
together.
Hopefully by the next episode.
I'm excited for musicals. I will come with a musical thing of the week next week.
We both will, and then we'll learn what your big
musical watch
favorite musical is that we'll be watching the week after.
Yeah.
When I do things of the week, I might stretch what a musical is a little bit.
That's fine. It's interpretation.
I might for my big pick too. Who knows?
Great.
I like to do my pick based on what yours is and to have kind of
to tie them together. Yeah. Well, I don't want to give you any hints, but it is a musical that I have loved since I was a child.
But until then, happy Spooktober, everybody. Happy Halloween. Go run naked in a forest. It'll be good for you.